listen up, you rockets. This isn't the most jaw-dropping news in the world. In fact, it's a lot of stuff we've heard before, but people keep sending it to me. And this might distract you from being upset that Francis Ford Coppola said that your children's films aren't very good. And it is also more validation for yours truly, as someone who repeatedly, years ago, warned the so-called AAA video game industry where their loot box decadence would lead them, as yet more political pressure has been applied to the mainstream video game industry with regards to in-game gambling mechanics, or as Electronic Arts prefers to call them,
surprise mechanics!
The pressure this time comes from England's Children's Commissioner Anne Longfield, who wants tight legislation, who wants a clamp down on loot boxes in games like FIFA. As we all know, right now, loot boxes have managed to sidestep classifications in a legal sense of gambling because there is no direct financial payout. Now, I've talked about virtual currency and virtual goods before as somewhat, in a vague sense, resembling money laundering. And again, as I've said in the past, I would never, ever go so far as to explicitly say that virtual currency, that microtransactions, that loot boxes are a form of money laundering. I would never explicitly say it. No, it's more like surprise cash rinsing. But anyway, Anne Longfield has said that she wants ministers to change current laws so that loot boxes are included in the gambling classification, as well as a mandatory max daily spending limit that is introduced so that children do not excessively spend on these video games. In addition to that, she expressed concern that social pressure is encouraging kids to spend on microtransactions, saying that kids are encouraged to spend on them to keep up with their friends, and we've seen that bear out in games like Fortnite, where the word default has become a derogatory term for kids who haven't bought new skins. And that was also confirmed by that wanker Torolf Jernstrom, who talked in great detail during a presentation about how spending in a video game should be presented as the socially acceptable way to play.
We are herd animals, we tend to do what all of the others do. You all sit quiet listening to me because that's what all of the other guys do here. You should have the socially accepted way of behaving in your game should be paying. You want to tell people, for instance, when a clan member of theirs spend IAP money, you want the whole clan to know, because then that becomes the socially acceptable way of behaving.
Longfield wants age ratings to apply to more video games, such as mobile games and online games, and said that kids themselves were getting worried that loot boxes were like gambling, which is interesting to see. Children have told us they worry they are gambling when they buy loot boxes, and it's clear some children are spending hundreds of pounds chasing their losses, said Longfield. I want the government to classify loot boxes in games like FIFA as a form of gambling. A maximum daily spend limit for children would also be reassuring for parents and children themselves. A government spokesperson responded to Longfield's report, saying, "Video games can be enjoyed by children safely as part of a healthy lifestyle, and we encourage parents to use built-in controls to set spending and time limits." Kind of an EA-flavoured response, though. They did add, "But we are clear children must always be protected from harm, and we will carefully consider the concerns raised in this report in relation to excessive or gambling-like behaviour." This, of course, all follows that parliamentary report that said that there were very clear connections between loot boxes and gambling, certainly as it pertains to the psychological effects of both. As far as PR goes for loot boxes, things in the UK are at an all-time low, and mainstream AAA video game spokespeople are really struggling to justify their existence, usually falling back on the old fail-safe of, well, technically it's legal, which, at least from an ethical standpoint, isn't exactly the strongest defense. To wit, Britain's video game industry trade body, UK Interactive Entertainment, or UKI, had a response, and it was characteristically weak. "We recognise the need to educate players, parents and carers about safe and sensible play habits, and for the industry to take an appropriate role in doing so. This is why we already work hard to proactively tackle the challenges highlighted in the report directly." Yeah, right. "The industry continues to promote healthy and balanced playing practices through our consumer information site, askaboutgames.com, and via lesson plans available for schools through UKI's Digital Schoolhouse Initiative." Have you ever heard of that initiative? Have parents who don't even follow the game industry Probably not. And that's at the real core of these things. The ESRB and the ESA does this in the United States as well. They say, well, somewhere on a website we said something once. And sorry, that's just not fucking good enough. Saying something somewhere on a website once isn't good enough. Not when you have mechanics in these video games that psychologically, ethically behave exactly like gambling and have created just enough degrees of separation to get just over the line to step beyond the purview of gambling laws. But this is what the video game industry keeps doing. It doesn't actually address the ethical and the moral and the behavioural concerns of loot boxes. It sticks to an increasingly flimsy script of technically not gambling, and we educate parents over here where no one's looking. These trade bodies claim to be proactive, but they're not. They're very proactive about looking proactive, giving the appearance of giving a damn, but they don't give a damn at all. It's all a routine to try and fob people off. But given the increased traction against loot boxes, the whole fobbing routine just ain't working this time. The reports about overspending by people preyed upon by microtransactions have just kept coming. The political pressure has just kept coming. And while some publishers have started to creep away from loot boxes, some of them make a big show of it for cheap applause, it's clear that the mainstream game industry still wants those gambling mechanics left untouched in their games, and the moment the political pressure wears off, you can likely expect to see loot boxes make their grand return to many mainstream video games with a vengeance. So it's important stories like this keep popping up, because I want that pressure to stay there, because I don't want to see loot boxes infest and infect and ruin more video games. It's as simple as that. Not only are they predatory and harmful, they make games worse, actively worse, by making them less rewarding, putting those rewards in gambling mechanics, making games grindier, less enjoyable, so that you pay for shortcuts. I mean, I don't want to see microtransactions of any stripe in a game you've already paid to play. Many of them push the boundaries of taste in free-to-play titles. So fuck loot boxes, fuck the game industry, and I'm glad to see stories like this still happening. And on that last bit, fuck the mainstream, big budget game industry and the publishers, not all video games. I know some developers get upset at me.